Greetings there all. Today is a landmark video. I have talked a little bit about, reforms in cannabis laws. I've talked about, how you can get seed and things like that in the past a little bit. I talked about industrial hemp and stuff, but I have really avoided the subject as much as possible, although it's been resistance on my part that I don't open my mouth on it. I've stayed out of it because, it's kind of a blacklist thing. This has been a general channel, really pretty much for everyone. I've tried to keep it that way. So I've avoided discussing the subject of cannabis directly as far as growing it. I've stayed out of that. But the way things are going with the laws in this country and some of the resistance we're having to try to just finally naturalize this plant, and remove it from the horticultural fascism that it's been locked under, it's been, for me, a little too slow. And so I feel that I'm doing my part to help push this thing along by making it public, talking about it. The more we steer around this plant and treat it as if it's something different than corn or bananas or grapes, the weirder this is going to be, and the longer it goes on. The only reason that there's a problem with cannabis and that cannabis is illegal is because of the government. Okay, poor judgment. If you want to find the history of how it happened, I'm not going to go through it. You go look it up. It has to do with DuPont trying to protect his patent on nylon. Harry Anslinger, who hated brown and black skinned people and knew they smoked the stuff, he wanted a tool to get them people. He was Bureau investigation prior to the FBI. I guess they called those guys G-men or something. He was a notorious racist. And then, of course, there was William Randolph Hearst, the media mogul, who was willing to go ahead and pull a Fox News and start putting out this information and lies about the plant in the public eye. Created reefer madness, which is still around, man. It was rotten propaganda, lies, and nothing had any, If you want to know what happens with this plant, look around you. It's been used for thousands of years by human beings, and it was only in 1937 that the plant was ever considered anything besides the doctor and the pharmacist's friend, the farmer's friend. The Columbus sailed to the New World on rigging and sails made from canvas. Canvas is the bastardization of the Latin word cannabis. Columbus's boats, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, had pot sails, We go on and on with this, It wasn't considered anything negative. It was a good plant, a normal plant, a natural plant, just like corn and wheat prior to 1937, and all the reasons that it went illegal were bad and wrong. They were based on prejudice. They were based on corporate greed. They were based on media people willing to lie in public for an agenda. It was all garbage. It was all garbage. Well, we bought it. American public bought it, and there's a whole lot of us out there still living in the world of reefer madness. Well, I'm tired of it. I've had it with them. It's just like QAnon and all the rest of that garbage. I've had it with most of it. Now, I'm only a short time here, it's like, this is my 72nd year on Earth. I won't be lasting much longer. I can see the doorway. It's out there. Most of my childhood friends are already through the door. Vast majority of my relatives already went through that door, and they're out of this world, okay? And I'll be following them pretty soon. And I could sit here and I could hold my breath. I could say nothing about things that are under my skin, or what have I got to lose? very little. Like I said, I'm out of here soon anyway. I'm a short timer, so who cares what I got to say? And I already lost thousands of viewers on this channel when I started talking in the 2020 election about what a dangerous psychopath and a liar that Donald Trump was, that he was going to be horrible. And I mean, I honestly did not believe America was dumb enough to put him in. Well, we weren't. Okay. He was never elected by the popular vote. Let's get that straight. Okay, the guy's an all-time loser. He's lost at everything he's tried, including his companies. They're all bankrupt. As a human being, he's failed, too. But, like I said, I already lost thousands when Trump ran for election of viewers on this channel because of my viewpoint, and it turns out that my viewpoint was 110% accurate. Yeah, look at the court cases going on today. Look at the people running into the jails. Look at the storming of the Capitol. They tried to hang Mike Pence. Now, I actually never did think, 109%. I really didn't think that he'd promote hanging the vice president. I really didn't believe that, but whatever. So, if I talk about cannabis here, there's reefer madness people out there who's bit the propaganda deep to their soul, who will probably go, this guy's crazy radical, turn this channel off, and I will lose a few more thousand viewers if I start discussing cannabis as if it was a normal plant with the rest of my garden. I'm going to do it. Yeah, take the risk. Ask me if I care, People who don't get the picture, people who don't understand where I'm coming from and want to walk away, please. I don't need the aggravation of dealing with you in the comment section anyway. So, leave a nasty word for me to let you know that you hate my butt and walk away. Okay, so today I would like to discuss cultivation of medicinal cannabis in Hawaii. Pretty specific to this climate, this area. Really, I'm even going to talk mostly about Puna Hilo area. We are unique in the USA because of how much rain we get over here. We're also unique because we're tropical, right? Yeah, that's also different. But we get a lot of rain. General area, easily between 120 inches down the slope and 200 inches up the slope. I'm sitting right about 150 inches approximately in this area. I'm halfway up and down, and so that creates a lot of trouble when you're trying to grow this plant. Cannabis is not really well adapted in most cases to climates like that, although what a lot of us have discovered over here, if you are an outdoor grower of this herb, is that there are land races out there that have been adapted for thousands of years to climates that are not that different than Hawaii's. Yeah, that's true. And may I define land race for you? Yes, land race is where you have a farmer living up on the side of a mountain somewhere, whether it be Thailand or Burma or wherever they are. And for generations and generations and generations of farmers, they've been taking a particular seed in a particular area and putting it into the field every year and growing it out. Gradually what happens is it becomes a land race. Yes, it adapts to the conditions where it's at over time. This takes a while. Yeah. Anybody tells you they can adapt a cannabis seed in 5 or 6 generations, no, that doesn't happen. But if you grow something in the same area long enough, and if you succeed with it and select for the variations, cannabis is filled with variations. It is a genetic mutation. It's very hard to maintain a very specific tight race with this stuff anyway. Generally, land races contain what we call phenotypes. Yeah, that's variations within the race. You plant one seed, and you get maybe 3 or 4 different types of plants that emerge from it. It's not uncommon. That's one reason I have a little bit of a problem with the cannabis seed sales thing today, because, it's fine to sell cannabis, but maintaining a pure strain, Well, it's a little bit beyond me. Maybe some of these guys can, but research I see claims that most of what is claimed to be this ain't this, it's that, or it's something else. Anyway, yeah, because that stuff just wild shifting. Anyhow, the land races will adapt to adverse conditions over time. Now, that's not necessarily true with our West Coast hybrids. West Coast hybrids are what most of you know. That's the OG Kush, right? Yeah, that's the White Widow, that's the wedding cake. And these names that are out there attached to certain varieties that are mostly grown indoors, under lights, with CO2 gas and fans and the whole 9 yards. It's what I call space station gardening for cannabis. That's how most of it is done today. Now, that wasn't true prior to, 1969, 71. Yeah. 70, 71, somewhere in there. I have to look it up again. But where Richard Nixon had the President's Report on Cannabis produced. Yeah, or it was called marijuana, but that is a racist term. Thank you. And I don't use it. But, yeah, it was a good report. The guys that did it did an accurate review. I read it in the day, and I was impressed. And I thought for sure, with this kind of technical data on the plant, we're going to release it. We'll free it, from fascist bondage. But nah, Nixon threw the thing in the garbage can. He said, this doesn't support what I want. And so he proceeded to lock down the borders, search everybody, spray all the crops in Mexico with paraquat, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. I actually crossed the border at that time, and oh man, yeah, everything but a proctoscope. Trust me, they even took a tire iron and ripped the back seat out of our car. We didn't have anything. That's stupid. Well, anyway, that created the domestic cultivation. Yeah, we really didn't have much of any kind of domestic cultivation prior to that. Nixon created the cannabis industry in the United States of America almost single-handedly. And he also caused the cocaine epidemic. I got another long story. I digress. But, as you applied pressure and stopped the hippies with a microbus from running a kilo of Acapulco Gold over the border in a spare tire, or something like this. Once you put a bust on that, the only guys that could get the stuff in the country were really well-financed. Lawyers, big mafiosos, and they had boats and submarines and planes, and since they sprayed all the Mexican fields and made that stuff poison and nobody wanted it, they had to go south down to Colombia and places like that, and so it started coming from southern points. It didn't take anybody very long to figure out, you could fill an airplane full of cannabis, it's bulky and it ain't worth very much, or you could fill an airplane full of cocaine in the same place. Hey, simple. Yeah, so they started bringing in coke. Nixon caused that. This is what happens when you keep trying to press down on something instead of just going, When you release it, problems will occur, but they're not going to be nearly as bad as the ones where you're kind of playing whack-a-mole constantly with something, which is what they've been doing. So, here in Hawaii, we do have permission with a permit and a doctor's approval to grow this stuff as medicine. Okay. Now, I am probably a bit different in attitude than a lot of Americans about this. I'm a geezer. My first joint was a summer of love. Okay, yeah. Well, watching the Grateful Dead, right, in Golden Gate Park. But prior to that, I grew up in the area of the nation in the Midwest, central Midwest, where cannabis was rampant. It was everywhere. Yeah, in the right neighborhood, that stuff was in every road ditch. It was on the railroad sidings. It was in the vacant lots all around us because we had raised it as rope in this country for hundreds of years prior. And then, as of 1937, they had to stop doing that because of DuPont, because he wanted nylon, not hemp fiber. And then we had to use permits during World War II for Midwestern farmers to graze the crop again because we had to have rope. I don't care what DuPont thought. The rope was essential to the war effort. And so we planted it all over the Midwest again. Illinois was covered in this stuff. Missouri, Ohio, Iowa, Indiana. It was everywhere. And the vacant lots that I played in as a child, cowboys and Indians, they smelled of cannabis. There was cannabis growing in the weeds in those lots. I knew what the plant smelled like long before I had any idea what it looked like. It was the first time I ever actually connected what the plant looked like with the smell. I said, oh, I've been smelling that all my life. We used to beat that stuff, and use it for whips, and we played with it. And so I don't really have this weird, strange attitude about the plant. In my brain, the plant is a stinking weed or it's an excellent cultivated crop. Take your pick. It's both. It's both. It gets around. The birds love that seed. Oh, boy. Yeah, so moving away from that, then let's talk about growing it here medically in Puna. To begin with, you will be faced with a real problem with the birds and the mice and the rats. They all know that hemp granola is great. Yeah, if you don't eat it, get a bag, try it. It's pretty good. But they all know that. And as soon as you plant those seeds, if the mice can get in there, if the birds can get at it, don't be surprised to find that overnight you're going to be topped off. They'll have dug them up, pulled them up, cut them in half, anything they can do to get at those cotyledons and eat the seeds on you. Inside a shed, out on the tables, it doesn't matter. I have myself found that I actually sometimes had to surround flats with glue boards even to get anything to come out of it because of these creatures. They know a good thing. So either exclusion of or removal of, the rats, mice, and exclusion of the birds will be essential. Chances are, whether it's indoors or outdoors, you bear a good chance you're not going to be able to get anywhere with this unless you do something about them first. They love it. Yep. Yeah, so glue boards surrounding your stuff, obviously rat traps, rat bait, cats. Speaking of cats, here comes mine. She heard me talking about mice and rats, huh, Gracie? Yeah, hi, girl. How you doing? She helps me with the mice. And she keeps off some of the birds, but unfortunately, she isn't necessarily around 24/7. I know a bunch of guys around here who, will raise this stuff who have the same problem. Oh, it's horrible. So, be prepared. Yeah, well, slugs like to eat it too. All right. Yeah, your seedlings are bound to get attacked. Yeah. Now, if you can manage to get a plant up to this sort of stature, where you got a matchstick size stem, it's pretty stiff, bounces back, what do we got? 4 to 6 inches high, If you can manage to get your plants up to that stature, well, then you probably got it made. At that point, your issues will be otherwise. You probably won't have bird problems, rat problems, mice problems anymore. Yeah, it passes. It's only the little tiny ones that are in trouble with that. So that's your number one issue. I do suggest, because of that the plants, the seeds, actually be started under grow lights, probably indoors, or that would be my suggestion. Now, you can do it outdoors, but you're going to have to really build a fort to keep the critters off of it. But yeah, that works too. But I find it easier just to use either the modern LED grow lights or the old time 4-foot fluoro plant tubes, the fluorescent plant lights. Used to use them on aquariums and stuff like that. Either work fine. Now, so that said, cannabis is a plant that is generally connected to what we call photoperiods. That means day length. As you know, the sun is, high and long in summer and short and low in the winter, even here. And, well, cannabis is very much affected by day lengths. All right. And so in Hawaii, it's possible if you're growing outdoors or indoors. Okay. If you're growing indoors, you can fake everything. Doesn't matter. Do it year round. If you're outdoors, you can still do it year round around here. But there's going to be challenges. And what you will find is that the juvenile cycle or the vegetative cycle and the flowering cycle in the plant are going to change depending on what time of year it is and when you put it out. Yeah. Plants put out during the winter time probably only grow a few inches higher, go into bud, and you end up with 12-inch tall flower tops if they're out in the winter here. Plants can be cut back. Yeah, plants were put out too early and flowered. Sometimes, depending on the variety, if you cut them back and leave a few nodes and leaves on the bottom of the plant, oftentimes they will re-vegetate. They can come back from more than one crop. I've seen this. Not all types do it. Now, we're talking about California hybrids or West Coast hybrids. Most of them don't do it well. Not at all. They're one shot, most of them. But a lot of the land races actually will tolerate being cut back, coming back, and sometimes flushing more than once. Okay, so now, laws, and laws. Finding out what is described as a cannabis plant and what isn't described as a cannabis plant here under Hawaiian law is not easy. Yeah, I try to do my research. Years ago, when I wasn't sure as a young man what I should be doing in my life, I asked the universe, what should I do with myself? And it came back and it said, be a farmer or be a lawyer or be both. Turns out it was very, very good advice. It is my life. Okay, I'm always dealing with laws and plants. Anyway, I did research trying to figure out what qualifies as a cannabis plant. That plant does not qualify as a cannabis plant under the commercial medical license laws. It's the only place in Hawaiian laws that I could find a description. A cannabis plant is described as 12 by 12. Okay, anything less than 1 foot by 1 foot is not considered a cannabis plant. And so it does mean that you could produce seedlings, clones, and so on that shouldn't really add up to the 10 total that the state allows here with the medical permit. Yeah, that you should be able to. I'm going to guarantee that, and don't take it to court, but that's the only place in the law I can find a description of what qualifies. So that probably does. So we have to watch out for mice, birds, rats. The day length cycle or the photoperiod cycle on the plants. Most cannabis is vegetative at 18 hours a day. If you set your timers on your grow lights for 18 hours a day, most of what you're going to get is going to be green growth leaf stems. You're not going to get much for any kind of flowers. Now, if you change the lights to 12 hours and less, well, then you're going to start to get flowers. Okay, now, it could be male, could be female, depends, but you will start to get flowers as the days decrease. And so if you take a plant right now that was grown under lights at 18 hours a day, you put it out here in March. Pretty soon, we're going to hit even days, March 21st, and then after that, the days are going to get longer than the nights. The plant will probably respond by growing rather large. It will become vegetative and produce a sizable plant frame before it actually starts to flower as days get shorter in fall. Now, that's an outdoor growing. On the indoor growing, well, you're going to do that stuff by yourself with the timer that's on your lights. Now, these days, not so bad because the new LED systems are pretty energy efficient, and today is World Energy Efficiency Day, by the way, and they're reasonable It used to be back in the day when this all got started as indoor growing, we used high-pressure sodiums and metal halides. Boy, these babies pulled like an arc welder. Man, talk about heat and current. Yeah, you could always tell an illegal grower just by looking at the electric meter because it spun like this. Oh, boy. It's not so bad today. But I am not an advocate of indoor growing. As I said, I come out of a background where we used to beat each other with the stems and vacant lots with this stuff. It was a weed in my mind. Okay, I don't see it the same way a lot of the younger guys who've come up with this. Oh man, they got all this science and everything behind it. And a lot of it's quite accurate, But sometimes I think the attitude on the space station gardening thing, the truth is out here in the streets. The Coconut Telegraph in Puna says, you can't grow cannabis outdoors in Puna. That's what it says. I've been told that many times. Of course, I know that's absolute horse crap, but that's most of what's on the Coconut Telegraph is. And so if you're familiar with what I'm talking about, this is the local yap gossip stuff, I wouldn't pay much attention to most of it. Yeah. So, yes, the plant can be grown outdoors, and there are advantages to doing it outdoors. I mean, for starters, free light and heat, the sun's up there, thank you. I don't see why I should have to convert the sun into electricity, pump it down through lamps, and put it on top of plants. That's crazy, okay? The sun's out here. The soil's out here, the rain is out here. All the things required to support a plant are naturally available in your garden on the Big Island. I suppose the biggest concern on doing this outdoors is, you could get ripped off if somebody finds out where your stash is at. Man, that could happen to you. Yeah. It's not quite as easy when it's hiding in shelter someplace. You could always lock the shed, I guess. But that aside, the advantages to growing the plant in the outdoor environment are huge. Now, there are disadvantages, and there are disadvantages to growing it indoors, too. So the idea that if you move things inside and put them under lights, that somehow you've created a sterile condition like a petri dish where nothing is going to happen, that's baloney. The worst problems I've ever had with pests are usually when things are in a hoop house or inside. Yeah, because if you get a couple aphids get in there and start multiplying, next thing you know, you have an absolute epidemic because there's nothing in there to disturb them. They have free run. You get a spider mite. I don't get spider mites out here in the rain. Spider mites don't like our wet environment. Yet, if you take the plant and bring it indoors, spider mites love it, and you can end up with an incredible spider mite infestation. It is a horrible problem with cannabis. Let's face it, you don't want to have to use insecticides on this stuff. Even if you're using stuff like deodorized neem, or soaps, they still have an effect. Usually I'll recommend if you get an aphid colony, take a hose and wash it off with water. Well, you could do that with cannabis, but the problem is too, you're going to knock away a lot of the potency on the plant that was accumulated when you force water at it too hard. Yeah. Anyhow, so let's just say if it's growing inside, expect to have serious problems with powdery mildew, depending on the strain you're raising. That will vary. Okay. Definitely, if you get aphids in there or if you get spider bites in there, really just expect to have a huge issue. Now, when you're outdoors, I've seen a few scale if you got ants around, but they don't really seem to cause too much trouble. I'd say the budworm. Yes, we have a caterpillar here, and he eats flowers on cannabis. And, well, of course, you don't want to let the worms eat your crop. But the biggest problem is with the rain we have around here. If the budworm gets in and chews on your stuff, that opens it up so that then you get botrytis. Yeah. Sometimes I like to spell it B-U-T-T, botrytis, because I don't like it. But, botrytis, it's a fuzzy gray mold with a brown rot. And you all know it out there. Most of the guys here in Puna that grows stuff, they call it bud rot, or brown rot or whatever, and that's what it is. And especially if the budworm has gotten in, it's going to open infection, and then the rain comes, and next thing you know, a whole flower top turns into brown squish and gray fuzz. Just eats it. Yeah, it dissolves it. And it's not good. It's not good. So watching for budworms. Now you can hand pick them. That's generally what I do. You can tell they're there because you can start to see little holes show up in leaves. If you see that, get looking in there and see if you can pull them out before it gets too bad. You can use BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. That does work on budworms too. I've never done it, but it does work. If it gets really dry here, and if you're growing the wrong strain, powdery mildew can be a big problem outdoors too. Mildew on some strains of cannabis is awful, especially in this environment if the rain stops. If the rain continues, you'll be all right, because the spores get washed away. They can't settle in on the leaves when it's raining. It's when the rain stops. You get 3 weeks with no rain, look out. It can start, and you'll start to see white powder on the plant. It's a white powdery stuff, and it rubs off on your fingers, and it smells like mushrooms. Yeah. So now the reason why I advocate actually growing outside, aside from the fact that the heat and lights out here, the soil's out here, everything plants use is out there, not in your closet. But the reason more than not is that, well, when things are being grown in controlled indoor spaces, you don't have the natural environment. And the natural environment, whether it's high wind, pounding rain, slight soil deficiencies, intense ultraviolet light, on and on, all the things that could happen in the outdoor environment, all of those things affect the cannabinoid complex and the terpene complex in a cannabis plant. That's right. You cannot develop the full potential, in my opinion, or not easily at least, of what these plants are capable of doing when they're in an indoor environment. Most of the indoor cannabis grown today in warehouses in the West Coast, it is all so similar, and the hybrids they're using to create it are also so similar, mostly combinations of sativas and indicas. It's that pretty much the stuff is all the same. 1967, when almost everything in this country was landrace from foreign nations. We didn't grow cannabis much here. Then everything was really different. Cannabis from Panama, Panama Red, was nothing like the Vietnamese purple or black. It was not at all like Santa Marta Gold, It didn't resemble Acapulco Gold or Michoacan or Oaxacan, okay? All of these plants were very, very, very unique and distinct, and what they did to you when you smoked them, their taste, the smell, the head buzz, everything, it was all completely different. Really, from one plant to another. There were similarities. It's all cannabis, but there were market differences. And, a lot of the old guys know this stuff. Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi, I know, were involved in a farm in Oregon where that was exactly what they were trying to do, was producing outdoor-raised cannabis from landrace strains. They went out and globe-trotted and hunted up Michoacan, most of it's getting lost. The narcos that work in Central America these days have pretty much eliminated a lot of the old-time landrace strains the farmers used because the West Coast hybrids are so much faster and more profitable. Yeah. All right, so they're going away. And there are people that collect them these days. I know quite a few here in the island. I myself definitely prefer landrace strains. They work better in the outdoor environment here. Some of the popular West Coast strains that are used here, OG Kush works okay. So does sour diesel, seems to be a popular here in this area. There's a few others that are used here. One of the problems with some of those hybrids here, though, is that most of them have indica in them, and indica is not a good choice in Puna. The indica strains have rather thick, dense buds, and what we need over here is something that the water drains through. And so most of the sativas have taller, skinnier, more open type flower structures that don't load up with water as bad, and so they're not as susceptible to disease here in general. Some of them are quite susceptible to mildew, but they're not as susceptible to rotting in the flowers. But there are a few common strains from the West Coast that work. So acquiring seed, well, cannabis seed is legal to purchase today. Yeah, the laws on this thing are all Wild West, and so I'm not even going to try. My research here in Hawaii indicates that you cannot sell cannabis seed within the state of Hawaii unless you are legally permitted to raise the plant. Yeah, I guess that makes pretty good sense, right? And so you have to have a medical permit or some sort of a commercial grower's permit here in order to be able to raise cannabis seed. Past that, I think just the same laws that apply to selling tomato seed and a peddler's license and so on are probably about all you really need. But don't take my word on it. Hire a lawyer. This is such a mess. It really is. I don't know. There were guys around the island over here that were selling seed. Well, we'll assume if they were doing that, they looked into it far enough that they knew they had to have a medical permit to do that. But they disappeared lately. They routed everybody. There was, over by the water tank over here near Kurtistown, there was the Ukrainian fried pie guy. There were fishermen. There was a huli chicken dude. You had poi balls over there. You had all kind of taco trucks and stuff that had pulled in and were selling stuff over there. But recently they went in and all of them disappeared. And the cannabis seed guy was over there too. And he seems to have disappeared. I don't know exactly how they drove them out, but chances are most of them just got kicked out of there because they didn't have vendor permits. And I don't know, maybe the water department didn't like them parking in front of the water tank. I have no idea. But they're all gone. Yeah. I have a number of people here on the island that are deeply connected to seed growers and or are seed growers themselves. I've been approached before about adding cannabis seeds to my website, which right now I'm really not interested in doing that. I don't want to get into it. But there are people here that have significant collections of seed. Not like the guy over here was set up with one seed, one type. No, there's guys here who have multiple strains. We have a few people here on the island that were responsible for actually breeding the famous West Coast varieties. Yeah, they're here too. And so, cannabis seed is pretty easy to find around here. What it is, well, it's going to depend. There's a lot of different kinds. But you can buy it mail order legally today. California has a number of different seed outfits that are pretty good. I like the guys from Europe, and it was not really legal to send that seed in until recently, where I guess seedsman.com set up a shop here someplace so they can do this. And so they do have a domestic office these days. They used to send it covert stealth packaging out of Europe. But that's changed. And that is probably my most highly recommended commercial seed source for most of you. Now, I like Ace Seeds in Spain because they are landrace collectors. But that's not for everybody. Seedsman has everything. They have wonderful filters. Sure, you can go in there and you can go, okay, let's see, disease resistant, high THC content, high CBD content, on and on. You can put all these different parameters in there, auto flowering, and all this. And you can filter Yeah, you can filter. I mean, they have hundreds and hundreds of selections. And so you can filter through it and kind of get into something that might be close to what you're looking for, what you need, because the plants are all different a little bit, and what they do, and depending on what your medical condition is, will depend. Maybe on which one you want to use. If your problem's inflammation, well, you're going to go towards a high CBD strain more than not. If your problem's anxiety, definitely a high CBD strain, and so on. You can tailor the type to your needs. The cannabis is divided into pretty much 3 categories. Pretty much, indica race, sativa race, and then the hybrids created between the two. Now, in that, you'll find that people are selling what we call auto flower. Now, for some of you guys who live way up in the Canadian Arctic, the auto flower is probably one of your best approaches, especially if you're working outdoors. But, if you're working indoors, you can trick everything. You don't need that stuff, because the way you throw the lights, the timers you set on the lights, is going to depend on what happens with your plants. And so you can actually artificially control that using the lights. But if you're out in the field, the auto flowers are plants that have been crossed to a rare Siberian strain called Cannabis ruderalis. I hate it. Yes, I hate it. Cannabis ruderalis is non-potent. It has no activity, but it is day neutral. It unlocks the photoperiod in plants when they've crossed it to it. Problem is, once they cross ruderalis into a good, say, sativa strain, you can't get it back out again, and it dilutes the strain, and it pops up periodically in the gene pool, etc., etc., and it is non-potent, and so I do not like autoflower plants, personally. There's also feminized seed. There's feminized seed too. Feminized seed's created 2 different ways. One way, the seed has been treated with silver nitrate. It's a chemical fix, and it will cause most of the seed to germinate as female instead of male. Because cannabis is a dioecious plant. It has male and female in the same seed. The males are generally known to be worthless and non-potent except for making seed, and the females are what we're looking for. When they feminize seed, there's also another process where they're actually doing this complicated thing with hermaphroditic plants in the breeding, plants that are both sex. And those I hate too, because sooner or later the hermaphrodites, or what we call hermes, will appear in your race. And so if you're saving seed, again, you can't get the hermes out of there. And so, I've been through that, and I ended up at one point in time absolutely dumping and getting rid of all autoflowering and feminized strains that I had, because they were just contaminating the gene pool, and started over again from scratch, using regular seed, which is a balance of about 50-50 males, females. Generally speaking, you'll get more females if conditions are perfect. Yes, if you have all the nutrients, all the light, all the water, you get more females. It's stress will induce males to create. A matter of fact, I've seen old seed, which is naturally stressed due to age, produce almost entirely males too. High percentages that way. Stress produces more males. Crowd your plants, you're going to get more males, and so on. If you decide to go the route of using non-feminized regular seed and growing outdoors, bear in mind that here in Puna, you may have neighbors who are also doing outdoor growing. Maybe. There aren't many, but there are some that do that. You might want to kind of get together and talk to them about the situation, because your pollen will drift into their plants, and they may be very unhappy with you because that happened, because they'll end up with seeded pot. Now, my suggestion is to, cannabis seed is good for a couple of years or so if it's stored properly, and so my suggestion is only periodically, every 2-3 years, to create a seed crop, and then don't grow seeds in between. That'd be my suggestion, because it does get messy. And just like the budworm that gets into your plant, if you have a lot of seed in a plant here and it's ripe, right, so that the husk around the seed is turned gold and so on, if it starts raining like crazy, that part of the plant is dead, basically. It stopped growing because the seed was ripened. And it's like a fall leaf. It will start infections too. Heavily seeded plants in the field when it's pouring rain are very susceptible to rotting. They also will germinate seed in the flowers. I've seen little seedlings popping out of the side of flower beds because the seed sprouted, growing roots down into the plant. Yeah, it's a crazy place, man. It really is, to try to do this. So, the people that say, "Oh, you can't do it outdoors in Puna," well, they're part right. They're only part right, but starting the seedlings, being aware of the problems you may be faced with. Now, this is being grown medically. Using insecticides is not a great idea. I don't suggest that. I don't. Okay. And you don't want to be smoking mold, Sometimes I've seen infections of powdery mildew get onto lower shade leaves and stuff like that. Well, all of the non-flower trim from any of my plants is used for edibles. And so, provided that the foliage isn't too gross, I just dry it all. And I throw it into pots of water and boil it outdoors in the grill with butter. And most of the crud, the dirt, the undesirable stuff basically falls out into the sludge in the bottom of the pot. And mostly the THC and CBD rise to the top in the butter. Yeah, and see, pretty good separation on cruddy pot leaves that way. And so I do suggest saving all of the trim, yes, to create edibles. It's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to make your own. I have not found that the state of Hawaii has any very good edibles in the dispensaries. In my opinion, they're all a little bit too weak. It certainly don't compare to any that I make around here. I do use them personally as a sleep aid. That's most of what I use it for. It's the main reason I grow this stuff. I got a beautiful sleep last night. Yes. It was 3:42 before I woke up this morning, and I managed to roll over till almost 6 afterwards. Yeah. So it's very useful that way, especially when you get the right strains. So, I touch on harvest and curing. Yeah, that's important too. Determining when to harvest around here depends. If you follow the textbook stuff, you can sit there with a magnifying glass and you could look at the globules of resins on the trichomes, on your leaves and flowers. And basically, while they're still clear, a few are starting to turn milky under the magnifying glass. That's usually considered harvest time. You're at your peak. When they start getting brown, the globules, then you're oxidizing. You're heading past the peak. That's a little old. Prior to when all the resin of the trichomes is crystal clear, you're still immature. And that's pretty much the way you tell. But in Puna, you might be directed to pick because rot started, powdery mildew started. Sometimes you bring the stuff in earlier than you would have wanted just because of conditions. This last pounding rain we had on some strains here just shredded the leaves. It didn't do it on all of them. Depends on what you're raising. But some of them got just totally hammered. There's some really nice stuff too. Well, once that occurs, you start to get necrotic spots in the foliage, and from there, bacteria and funguses get going and can spread into your crop and really mess it up. And so like after this pounding rain, if you see that you got a lot of necrotic spots in your shade leaves, you might want to just go ahead and harvest anyway if you're anywhere close. And cut the plant back and let it revegetate. The weather might turn, it may come back again on you, and you get another crop off the same stump. Because of the 10 plant limit here, if and when I do something like that, I will usually always replace it with another clone or seedling in the same area. So if the stump doesn't revegetate, I just cut it back and I get another plant popping out of the same area. It helps keep things on the 10 plant limit with the 12 by 12 size range, so you can keep a continuous production that way if you do it right. That would be when you will time a harvest, I guess. As far as what to do when you harvest, well, kid back in the Midwest, man, we used to cut them things down and hang them up in the rafters in the barn. Shade leaves and all, just hang the stuff up and it'll cure. Cure real nice, and then you bring it in, you break everything down and sort out what you need and what you don't want and so on. But it don't work here. Most of us who've ever tried that that technique realize that, within 24 to 48 hours, the whole entire plant is probably turned into white cottony mold. Oh, how horrible. Yes, what happens is those large leaves that we call the shade leaves usually will collapse as they wilt against the sides of the stems, burying the flowers away from the air, covering them, and then allowing any mold that was in there to start growing like crazy, because things don't dry very well here at all. There's a whole variety of possible different ways you can do this. I do not recommend using a dehydrator. It just really messes with the quality of the stuff, particularly the flavor and smokability. That's not a good solution. Removing all the shade leaves to begin with. Take off all the larger pieces of foliage that you don't intend to use otherwise. Cut them off. I usually like to use cardboard boxes in relatively dry, cool places. The cardboard, it seems to soak the moisture out, and the leaves will dry pretty nicely. Just piled up in a cardboard like that if they're not too deep. Small layer. And you remove all that stuff. And then you could hang the entire frame, but I really think you're better off separating the branches with the flowers hanging on them, separating them. That way you can hang these things up in a fairly warm environment to try to begin to cure them out. Okay. And I'll usually take mine and I'll run out till they're not quite crunchy. It's still a little squishy, a little bit, but we're 80% of the moisture or more has been removed, just sitting there dehydrating. Usually in that process, you'll have developed better sugars and the flavor will be superior. It will have cured to some extent, done that way. I'll usually go through and then I'll trim off the individual flowers, and then I tend to pack them in glass jars with silicon dioxide, the little packages in your medicine bottles. That will finish the last 10-20%. It's going to draw it out so the stuff will remain. Now, I know a lot of the guys in the mainland like it when they have a certain moisture content and it's squishy. No. You do that here, it's going to get so moldy. Yes, it's going to get so moldy. Take all the water out of it as much as possible. Yeah, I keep it stored in silicon dioxide. That's what I do. Little packages and dump them in there, put it in the jar, wrap them around it, and screw it shut. It only takes about 48 hours or so to pull off that last remaining bit, and they become crunchy. You can come up with all kinds of different ways this can be done. Ambient warmth from things like your grow lights it will help. If the temperature where you're curing is between 85 and 95 degrees is probably really good. It's not too hot. Yeah, it'll dry nicely there.
Well, look who's interested in my plant. Gracie says, "You ain't talking to me. What's up?" He says, "How come we're not talking about cats today? I'm going to come on over here and I'm going to sit next to this plant. Maybe you'll start talking about cats, right?" Hey, Gracie? She's such a good kitty. You keep the mice off that for me.
Hey, well, aloha, folks. Good luck. Have a wonderful crop.